For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic. entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Monday. Thom Hartmann here with you, and not so much going on over the weekend other than this major crippling cybersecurity attack on the northeastern part of the United States. We're going to get into that, how Trump crippled our cybersecurity and what Joe Biden, President Biden, might be able to do about it, and where do we go with all that sort of thing. We'll get into that. My op-ed this morning over at HartmannReport.com is titled "The Deep Delusions of the GOP Stripped Down." The Republican Party has literally gone from being a threat to the lives, health, and wealth of working people to being a full-on threat to democracy and our republic itself. We're going to get into that. In the second hour of our program, Wendell Potter's going to drop by. There's this guy who left his job and took one of the new Trump policies. You'll remember the Trump Care got rolled out a couple of years ago to great fanfare, and these are much cheaper insurance policies that you can buy. He bought one and ended up, $35,000 in the hole? And what does that tell us about Medicare Advantage? Anyhow, we'll get into that in the second hour when Wendell Potter drops by. And also I want to get into this piece that I published at HartmannReport.com over the weekend in our second hour about this child killer, Dwayne Hickman, as I recall is his name, in 1927, who inspired Ayn Rand, who inspired the objectivist movement and the libertarian movement, and now is one of the leading lights of the Republican Party. She's, passed away back in, I think, 72, but her ghost lives on. And we're going to get into that in the second hour and really asking the question, why are we amazed by QAnon when the GOP was transformed by a psychotic child murderer back in the 20s and they're still, embracing this? And then in our third hour, I want to dig into this question. Why are the media, why are they doing things like interviewing Josh Hawley without saying, sir, why do you support treason? I mean, they're literally pretending like January 6th never happened. So we'll get into that. And, feel free to, if any of these topics that you want to talk about, we're kind of on the edge of anything goes summer, in fact, here. But it being May 10th. But first, I want to start with cybersecurity. This is crazy. This is from the Washington Post, right? Joseph Marks writing for the Washington Post. He said, during the 4 years in office, Donald Trump failed to hold adversaries, including Russia, accountable for hacking U.S. targets, removed experienced cybersecurity defenders from their posts for petty reasons, and undermined much of the good work being done on cybersecurity within federal agencies. And this was a survey of over 100 cybersecurity respondents. 71% of them agreed with every one of those statements. Here's what happened over the weekend. Colonial Pipeline, one of the largest pipeline operators in the United States. I think most people are unaware that we're even, the country is just covered with these fuel pipelines. We are very dependent on oil. It's fossil fuels is that's what runs our country. That's what feeds our country. It's what fuels our country. The transition to some sort of renewables. Again, keep in mind, if everybody in the Northeast had solar panels on their roofs like they do in Germany, then, although Germany is negotiating for a pipeline with Russia right now, which is a whole nother topic. But in any case, if everyone had solar panels on their roofs, at least this would be radically mitigated. But no. And they had to shut this thing down because this is 45% of the East Coast fuel. I think where it's going to get, over the short term, what we're already seeing is the price of gas going up. and home heating oil, although, fortunately we're going into the summer. But the area where it's going to get real freaky if this lasts very long is going to be jet fuel. And although this pipeline, I'm pretty sure the pipeline, everything I've been able to read indicates that the pipeline is just carrying crude, basically. So they're refining the jet fuel up in the Northeast, which means that they'll have, probably weeks, if not months worth of supply. But I haven't been able to find anything that has a definitive, these are all like trade secrets held by giant multi-billion-dollar corporations. But this was apparently done by a criminal gang known as the Dark Side, which is based out of Russia. And they have been doing these ransomware attacks all over the place. These come after news of the SolarWinds hack, which also came out of Russia, and that's one that's particularly fascinating. This is again from CNN, for example, by Samantha Vinograd. Hackers infiltrate with Trump administration officials. This is from the last year of the Trump administration. Trump administration officials revealed several federal agencies, including the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and large parts of the Pentagon, have been compromised in what could have been one of the largest cyber attacks in U.S. history. The hackers infiltrated SolarWinds, a software company based in Austin, and 400 of the Fortune 500 companies, and all these federal agencies took their software updates from SolarWinds, and those software updates contained this virus that exposed them and their email and their data to this, basically to this Russian hack. And when news came out that the Russians had not only hacked our federal government, but were actively inside our federal government, the response of the Trump administration was like, so what? What's the big deal? It's really pretty breathtaking. In fact, actually, what Trump, the bipartisan leaders of the House Homeland Security Committee on Wednesday, this is again from the last months of the Trump administration, severely criticized a proposed drop in funding for cybersecurity. The lawmakers took particular issue with the proposed funding cut due to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, as a federal office. This, of course, Trump was upset with these guys. How dare you stop our friends from hacking us? Or how dare you say that, the election was clean? With a proposed cut for CISA of over $250 million going into next year. And this is, the Republicans were going along with this, right, in Congress, saying, yeah, no problem. But the Trump administration is actively, this is, again, from Wired.com, Ishan Mehta. The Trump administration is actively undoing the progressive cybersecurity policy of past administrations. The role of the White House security coordinator was eliminated by John Bolton. Former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson removed the Office of Coordinator of Cyber Issues. And the White House's 2018 budget, keep in mind, this is 3 years ago, zeroed out funding for the biggest digital evidence training center in the country. Now, Congress has tried to fight back on this, or at least Democrats in Congress. Republicans have just gone along with this. That this is just, another mess left over from the Trump administration and from his getting cozy with God only knows. Whether it was that he was trying to, I think personally that somebody in Russia, whether it's the oligarchs or Putin or the government itself, or whether it's just he wants to build Trump Tower, that he spent 4 years basically doing whatever they wanted and saying that they were wonderful and all that kind of stuff. And I think that he was afraid to go after them. He was afraid to say anything as president, and he still is. And it may be, I know now it comes out that there's a second Steele report that was provided to the FBI that actually may have videos of Trump being compromised in Moscow. Who knows? But, what the hell is going on here? Well, actually, I can tell you. Trump ruined our cybersecurity capabilities. And so Biden is now saying, number one, particularly with private infrastructure, we need to carefully monitor these companies because obviously they can't do it themselves. And we need to, have strong guardrails and hold them accountable.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. And welcome back. And let's see here, Randy in the Dalles, Oregon. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching this on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, not much. Hey, Tom, are you pretty good at history?
It depends. There are some parts of history I know pretty well, and there are other parts I don't. What do you want to know?
Well, I have a question for you, and most Americans should know the answer to this question. And I want to tell you that I got the answer from the History Channel. You know the History Channel, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I'm being set up for something here, Randy. Where are you going with this? What's the point you're trying to make?
Well, I just want to ask you, where is Ford Motor Company's biggest factory?
Probably in Mexico. Why?
No, it was built in the Soviet Union, Russia, in 1929 in the town of Gorky, the Gorky plant.
Okay, so what's the point?
Well, the point is, Caterpillar's biggest plant was built in the Soviet Union, too, in 1931. And most of the factories that were built in the Soviet Union during Stalin's 5-year plan were American, British, and German factories.
Well, and there was a lot of that going on. That's how the Coke fortune got created. Fred Koch went over there and was drilling oil and all that kind of stuff for the Soviets. I don't recall the years, but it might have been during that same period or slightly thereafter.
Right. Well, all the Ford trucks were used for troop carriers for satellite communist states like Red China, North Vietnam.
Right. Randy,
Cuba.
IBM supplied the computers that the Nazis used for their final solution, to exterminate the Jews. We've got a lot of American companies that have gotten involved with a lot of nasty other, companies overseas. I think Pinochet in Chile is another great example. But I still don't understand the point you're trying to make, or is there not one?
I'm just saying that communism was intertwined with the bankers and capitalists.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was a corrupt system. I mean, this is the problem with power, right? I mean, the Bolsheviks took over, and then you had all these internecine battles throughout the 1920s and the early 1930s in what became the Soviet Union. And ultimately Joe Stalin ended up on top for a while. It was Lenin and then Stalin, but before that you had all these battles between the Bolsheviks and the various factions. And I'm no scholar on that time or that era, but there were a lot of experiments and there was a lot of interaction with other countries, and they were they were literally trying to figure out a new way to run a government. The original Marxist, altruistic, let's make sure everybody's in good shape, give everybody a job, give everybody health care, give everybody housing, sounded wonderful. But what happened was the people who stepped into power after taking down the czar and saying, this is what we're going to bring you, many of them were just as corrupt as the people they were replacing. It's one of the reasons why you have to have checks and balances in a government, which the Soviet Union never had.
Well, right. Well, what I'm trying to say is, now you guys complain about conspiracy theorists, but this is why there's so many conspiracy theorists. I mean, they're saying stuff like this, and people don't believe them. So,
well, I can't vouch for the truth or the not truth of it, but I do know that there was a lot of interaction between American companies and the early Soviets, and like I said, Fred Koch made his fortune there. The Koch brothers wouldn't be if it wasn't for Joe Stalin. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
We're trying to provide the very best content that we can for you at Hartmann Report and over at thomhartmann.com. And on Hartmann Report, every day, 6 days a week, I write an op-ed. Very often they're my rants, also for the radio and television program. And it's ad-free, commercial-free. It's free. You can sign up. It'll get pushed into your email box. Check it out at hartmannreport.com. And, of course, over at thomhartmann.com, we have our weekly video that we put up every week that does a deeper dive for people who are members of our program of thomhartmann.com. And the one this week is about this Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGAR, their new report that almost 20 million Afghans are on the verge of starvation and nobody's talking about it. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. So the op-ed that I put up today, I want to bring this out too, is this, Jamie Dimon is out whining about how his taxes are going to go up under Joe Biden. Oh, poor Jamie. His bank took $10 billion in 2009, and some amount of that, no doubt, ended up in his pocket. But there's, and screw Jamie Dimon, right? I'll get to that more in detail in just a moment. But ever since the late 70s and early 1980s, both the Democratic and Republican parties were operating under a series of essentially economic delusions. FDR had put us back on the track with classical economics, Adam Smith economics. It was referred to at the time by a variety of names. Keynesian economics from John Maynard Keynes, who kind of restated. He was the 20th century's version of Adam Smith. But Adam Smith laid this stuff out in his book Theory of Moral Sentiment and Wealth of Nations back in literally in 1776. Adam Smith wrote the book on this, on how an economy should run. And so FDR was, putting America back together, and Eisenhower, frankly, in the 1950s. And there were a few conservative thinkers. Well, actually what was going on was there was a bunch of rich people who were very upset about the fact that the top tax rate, the top income tax bracket was, a 90% rate. And some of them were falling into it, and they were like, we don't like this. And they didn't like their companies being regulated, and they didn't like the government doing things for people with their tax dollars. So basically they hired this guy, Milton Friedman, out of the University of Chicago, who began promoting this idea that of essentially deregulation, that if we just ended all regulation, everything will be wonderful. That instead of government bureaucrats deciding, protect, let me rephrase this. An economy is like a football game, right? You've got the players, which run from the uber rich all the way down to the poorest among us, and the largest chunk in the middle is the working class. So those are the players in the economy, of the football game of the economy. You have the rules, which are established by government. In the case of football, it's the NFL, and you have the referees, which is government regulatory agencies. So what Friedman came along and said was, we need to gut the rules. We need to gut the referees, and we need to turn basically supervision of the economy, control of the economy, even direction of the economy, away from the government. Take that control away from the government and put it into the hands of the people who are running the economy, the richest, most powerful sectors in the economy. And why? Because they're seeing, a guy who runs a bank, a multi-billion-dollar bank, is literally seeing 1 million transactions a minute. So they know which way money is flowing. They know how the market is reacting. Jeff Bezos, the guys who run Amazon, they know what the hot products are. So having government try to, regulate the economy when these guys who are like the captains of industry have so much data so fast and so accurate, it's crazy. Why put this in the hands of government? You can trust these guys, the Jamie Dimons of the world. You can trust them. They'll be straight with you. Just turn the economy over to them. This is Milton Friedman's pitch. And in 1973, he put this into place in Chile, and they privatized their Social Security system. And when people protested, they took them up in helicopters and threw them out and let them die. Seriously. There's actually, in fact, it's one of the favorite T-shirts. The one, white power protest here in Portland that I went to, there was a bunch of the guys who were wearing these various different T-shirts about, part of the Pinochet helicopter corps, right? So, he tried it in 73. It sort of worked for a short while and then wiped out Chile. And then, Margaret Thatcher put this into place in 78. And Jimmy Carter said, hey, good idea. And he deregulated trucking and he deregulated travel. Louise and I got into the travel business because of that deregulation. Made some money, got out, moved to Germany. It was a good time, it seemed. But that deregulation, as it bit into the economy, basically turned the economy over to the predators. And at that same time, this was 1980, Reagan became president, and he institutionalized this throughout government. In 92, Bill Clinton, or 93 when he became president, Bill Clinton basically said, hey, cool, no more era of big government. Welfare as we know it is done. We're going to buy into this deregulation thing too. And this has been going on, in the Republican Party for 45 years, and the Democratic Party for about 30 years. And now, just in the last 5 months, Joe Biden has come along and said, no, we're going back to our roots. We're going back to FDR. And thank God for that. And thank God for the people like Jan Schakowsky and Bernie Sanders and Sherrod Brown, who have been holding that space in the Democratic Party since the 80s. And saying, no, you guys, this experiment that Bill Clinton wanted to do, this experiment that, that Ronald Reagan tried, it's going to fail. It has failed. Here we are. Thank God for it, huh?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So I guess the question is, how do we best, deal with or fight or take on Republicans who are still pursuing this ideology, and a few Democrats?
Reading today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs, or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, excuse me. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by Porter.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Stacey Abrams, this is absolutely extraordinary. This is a woman who really understands history, politics, culture. I mean, it has a deep understanding of these things. I am continuously impressed by Stacey Abrams. She was interviewed by CBS News over the weekend, and she was asked, do you want to serve as President of the United States one day? Now, just think about that, question. I mean, for a person in politics, or for a person who ran for governor of the state of Georgia and is almost certainly going to be running for the state of, as governor for the state of Georgia again next year. So they asked her, is running for president part of your ambition? And she said, do I hold it as an ambition? Absolutely. And even more importantly, she said, and this is where you get this sense of history that this woman, you know, she is part of. She has made history, right? She turned Georgia blue. And she totally gets it. She goes, and even more importantly, when someone asks me if that's my ambition, I have a responsibility to say yes. For every young woman, for every person of color, for every young person of color who sees me and decides that they're capable, what they're capable of, based on what I think I am capable of. Again, it's not about you cannot have these things, you refuse to, excuse me, again, it's about you cannot have these things you refuse to dream of. I thought that was just extraordinary. Also, now the crazy guy who owns the CEO of the private company that's doing the so-called recount of the vote in Arizona, where they're looking for bamboo fibers in all of the ballots to see if any of them were shipped in from China at the last minute to you know, pre-filled in for Biden. Honest to God, that crazy guy, that conspiracy nut that the Georgia Senate hired and that they're doing private fundraising to pay for, by the way, that guy has now asked for the passwords into the sheriff's office in Maricopa County. They're auditing Maricopa County, the largest county in the state. It's Phoenix, basically. It's got the largest percentage and the largest population of people of color. And so now this crazy conspiracy nut who runs this company, Cyber Ninjas, has asked for the passwords. And the sheriff is like, no, are you guys nuts? I think the answer to that is, yeah. But, I mean, really? Are you guys nuts? Anyway, let's pick up your phone calls here. Joyce in Kilmarnock in Virginia. Hey, Joyce, I'm probably mangling the name of your town. I'm sorry.
Kilmarnock, it's Scotland.
Kilmarnock. Ah, okay. Yeah, it sounds it.
Yeah.
What's up?
Yes, I grew up in what was not a rust belt, but has become a rust belt during my lifetime. I'm aware of the pipeline business that is done secretly, making a dump out of state of Michigan, parts of Minnesota, and I suspect that this pipeline from Texas has been created to allow the real push for this Enbridge project that dips down from Canada and the tar sands and down into the Rust Belt states and back up to Canada where their port is. And I just think it's it takes over a whole native policy to allow the Indians to have sole collection of things like the wild rice. I mean, they had free reign in that part of Lake Michigan and the Upper Great Lakes for years. And
until the pipelines came through.
And the other, the Kalamazoo River has not been cleaned up. They've been promised.
Yeah, it's still a mess, and that's the
right,
Canadian tar sands oil that is almost impossible to clean up.
And the pipeline that is so old up near Mackinac, next to the bridge, has never been replaced. So there's a whole lot of opportunity for using those states as trash bins.
Right, a lot of opportunity for disaster, and I get your point. I'm sure Enbridge will use this as a PR opportunity. Hey, we need more pipelines. No, we don't. We need more solar panels. Dave in Federal Way, Washington.
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to add a couple. I just wanted to add a couple things to what you were saying. Look, and by the way, that last caller was phenomenal because really this all kind of connects back to oil, and as far as like these this Russian non-state actor, CNN said that it was a Russian organized crime, computer crime gang, not based in Russia. In my opinion, that's what everybody should pay attention to, because this is going to get complicated. Okay, and just another example is North Korea. If you ever go to the Korean War Museum, you will see a newspaper clipping from that period. If you read Hangul, Korean, it says that China had sent a Chinese army across the border with North Korea to protect Chinese citizens. Now, you're like, well, wait a minute, that's like a double entendre. Well, of course, China would send a Chinese army. Well, the point is it's complicated. Back in those days, China was known to conscript. They would just conscript, outside their will, Koreans from that area of North Korea into the military.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Dave, what does that have to do with a pipeline in the United States being attacked by a Russian organized crime gang?
Okay, here's what it's got to do with it. All right, the Biden administration is doing strategic patience with North Korea. The Trumpers have capitalized on that. That's a failure, they say. Trump was better. No. And also Nord Stream. Biden said, it went back to the Obama playbook, look, we are going to stop Russia from doing this Nord Stream pipeline into Germany. Even the Germans said, look, it's too late. It's too late. And Germany is a very key ally. All right. So what this all has to do with is Americans, we might be lured into this false hope that, look, Donald Trump is an authoritarian. Authoritarians all get along. Here's my main point, Tom. They get along until they don't. And then when they don't get along, it is mass calamity and death for people that did not see it coming. I am trying to stop.
So are you asserting, Dave, that you think that this pipeline hack was anything other than an attempt to make a few $100 million? Because it sure looks like, I mean, this is a ransomware attack. It could be, testing. I mean, we had this conversation with, I think her name is Nicole Perlman, Pearl Roth, that's right. Last week or the week before, about how much of our infrastructure has been infiltrated, how during the Trump administration, the Russian government apparently, or hackers at least from Russia, got inside the State Department. They got inside the Department of Defense. They got inside, the Treasury Department. These are the ones that were reported publicly. And nobody has said, definitively yet that they've got them out, that they're still inside our government. So are you suggesting that this, taking down this pipeline was some way of saying, hey, look at what we can do?
What I'm saying is I'm talking about inevitability versus evitability. Okay, look, if the powers that be, the war profiteers, all right, look, George Bush said if there's a cyber attack and it is sufficiently crippling, we will attack with hard power. In other words, we will blow it up. They said this is a Russian criminal gang operating inside the borders of Russia. Because we don't necessarily know, thanks to the nature of automation, where this gang is operating out of. And this just isn't Dave spouting nonsense, okay? We attacked the Chinese.
That's the wonder of VPNs and things. Yeah, no, I get it. Dave, I need to move along. I think you've made your point, but thank you very much. John in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania says here, you disagree with me? You go to the front of the line. John, what's up? We have about a minute and a half to a break.
Hi, Tom. It's definitely sure that Trump was much tougher on Russia as a whole than Biden or the Obama administration ever was.
How so?
Putin took Crimea under the Obama administration.
Right. So what did Trump do where he was tough on Russia, John?
Trump armed the Ukrainians, and the Obama administration did not. Trump also ended the Iran deal, which Russia supported. And in terms of oil,
so did the United States. That was not, that was not to the benefit of Russia. That was the benefit of the world that Trump ended.
Yet Russia
and
supported
also, sure, of course. So did Germany.
Started two conflicts with Russia that they lost. They lost in Ukraine and they lost in Syria. They failed, and they caused
I wouldn't
huge
say those
disasters.
were conflicts that we lost. And number two, with regard to Syria, what did Trump do?
massive
He
weaponry
stabbed
into
our
Syria.
allies, the Kurds, in the back. He basically, you know,
Right.
the emperor of Turkey called Trump up and said, "I want to
Obama
kill
jihad who killed those
the Kurds." Excuse
Tom.
me.
Obama killed the Kurds. Obama
Yeah,
killed
and okay, John. And Trump stuck the knife in their backs. And as they were leaving, you'll recall, after Trump betrayed the Kurds, because the president of Turkey said you might lose your hotels in Turkey. It appears that was the leverage. I mean, it's just amazing. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Thom Hartmann with you. And welcome back. Mike in Valley Springs, California. Hey, Mike, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
My wife was talking to her sister yesterday, and her sister watches that Fox propaganda channel, and she said that they were, they own some farmland that they lease out, and they said that Biden and his administration is going to try and tax it all the way back to where they first got it, which is 4 or 5 generations ago, and then when we die, the kids will have to pay that tax.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's any truth to that, or is it just...
No. They are talking about slightly reviving the inheritance tax and changing it so that capital gains that happened in previous generations end up getting taxed at the time of transfer. But, is your property worth more than $15 million?
No. Not as far as I know. It's only a couple hundred acres.
Then there's no tax on it at all. I mean, the tax begins on an estate that's worth $15 million, and it's a fairly low tax at that point. And then as your estate goes up toward $100 million or $200 million or $500 million or $1 billion, then the tax starts going up substantially. And again, this hasn't been passed. This is just what they're discussing. But,
so
of course, Fox is always...
Your family... This goes all the way back to when your family first bought it?
That's a stretch. That's a real stretch. But it doesn't matter. If it's under $15 million, it doesn't much matter. The point is that what Fox does, and this is what the right does all the time, is they try to get the average person to think like they're a billionaire. Biden wants to raise taxes on people over $400,000 a year. Oh, that's going to affect you. You better watch out. Biden wants to raise the estate tax on estates over $15 million a year, or over $15 million that are being left, which, by the way, is only, even right now, the estate tax only affects a couple thousand families a year in the United States and only marginally affects them. And so, they're going to hype it up to the point that you're starting to think that, oh, my God, when Grandpa dies, it's going to be the same thing as when Rupert Murdoch croaks, except he's moved back to Australia. So I don't think he's going to have to worry about it. But they try. And the reason, by the way, that they're doing this is a lot of very, very wealthy families. I mean, like you've got hedge fund guys who are making literally $1 billion a year, right? So you've got some guy who's worth $5, $10, $15 billion, and he's in his 70s now, and he's looking at making sure that the money gets passed on to his kids. So what's he doing? He's putting all that money into things like the stock market, because right now, if he puts $1 billion into the stock market, and by the time he dies, it's worth $2 billion. He never pays any tax on that increased value, that from $1 billion to $2 billion. And what Biden is proposing is that increased value actually be taxed when he dies, and which seems reasonable. I mean, you should pay a tax on it at some point, shouldn't you, Mike?
Well, yeah, I believe. I don't understand why hedge fund people don't have to pay taxes, because it's not considered earnings.
Correct. I mean, that's the thing. Right now, it's a loophole in the estate tax, is that you can have all these earnings. You can have massive, what are called capital gains. And if you simply die and pass them along to your kids, no tax, no foul, no problem. And Biden wants to fix that. But of course, Fox is going to talk about it like, we're going to steal Grandpa's money. No, that's not what it's all about. Mike, thanks for the call. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a couple of special things over at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com. Of course, at HartmannReport.com, every single day, well, 6 days a week, Sunday accepted, I write a rant about an issue of the day that I think is important. Louise and I work on these together. We get them out typically around 6 in the morning Pacific time. And you'll find that at HartmannReport.com. It's free. You can sign up for it. There's no ads, whatever. But also over at ThomHartmann.com, we have a video every week for the supporters of our program. And the one this week is about how Wisconsin is trying to remove, in fact, they just got permission from their Supreme Court to remove 188,000 people from the voting rolls because they haven't voted in 4 years. This highlights the importance of getting to know who is your state representative, who is your state senator, and communicating with them regularly. It's all over at HartmannReport.com and ThomHartmann.com. 10 minutes before the hour, Cindy in Houston, Texas. Hey, Cindy, what's up?
Hello there, Tom. Not much. Just wanted to say something really quick. You spoke about something that is so important to me. Of course, Bernie Sanders being a Democratic Socialist. And when you start talking about this, it's just, first of all, thank you so much for bringing it out in the open. Democratic Socialism is a word that people feel like it equals communism. They don't understand who FDR is. They don't understand at that time what the New Deal did, and even how hard it was for the FDR when he was running, how the Republicans all called him a communist because he was considered Democratic Socialist. Now, right. I think for me, it's mind-boggling how you can have the top 1%, how you can have a Fox News and speaking about to the people how they want to have a small government. But in reality, look at what they're doing now today. It is not as small. They want the government to work for them, correct? Which of course would be considered socialism for the rich. And it's just mind-boggling how many people out there today still cannot grasp and understand that the problem is not on the working people. It's not my neighbors. It's not immigration. It's at the very, very top. And that's the part to me that if we can get enough awareness out there, people to realize that what the problem is, then, we can have a lot of hope. And along with Bernie Sanders, to me, that right there is where I saw so much hope. And
well, Bernie came out the other day and said, Joe Biden is doing better than I could have done. It's not literally the words he used, but it was something close to it, because he's president right now. I mean, he actually got the job, and now he is doing so many of the things that Bernie has been arguing for all these years. There are always going to be deficiencies, but in any, I mean, there's no perfect anything. But I think he's doing a great job, Cindy.
It's the people though, that have to keep going. It's us being involved in politics on a daily basis. Politics, people say you can't talk politics, you can't talk religion. But in fact, I think the problem we have right now is that people have stayed back too long. Bernie Sanders has changed that. I know people now that are involved on a daily basis. They're listening to you. People that are out there that are realizing, we have got to be involved. We've got to see, because if we don't step up to the plate, then we're going to be in a lot more trouble. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. Yeah, and Bernie deserves a lot of credit for this, although he's not alone in that. Jan Schakowsky's been fighting that battle. Sherrod Brown has been fighting that battle. There's a bunch of people out there who've been fighting that battle for a long time. Greg in Port Huron, Michigan. Hey, Greg, what's up?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. Yeah, I've been watching you for 10 years now, so I'm getting my history lessons on a daily basis. What I wanted to talk about was, I can't believe, I mean, you were around in 1969-70 when Charles Manson, did his thing out there in California. Isn't there a similarity between what he did and what Trump has done in Washington at the White House?
That's why that's why it's referred to as the Trump cult. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I can't see what all the, I mean, you see on a daily basis, well, they're trying to find this guy, and they're talking about all these guys that crossed and went into the White House, and it's already been laid out by Vincent Bugliosi years ago. You could follow his playbook, and this could be over in a week.
And that was Bugliosi was going after George W. Bush. He wrote the case for the impeachment of George W. Bush for war crimes, and but he's the guy, of course, who prosecuted Manson and wrote the book Helter Skelter, Vincent Bugliosi. And in fact, he's been on the show before he died. He was on the show a number of times. But I think that, that's the cult. And as soon as you say, oh, yeah, Donald Trump's creating a cult just like Charlie Manson did, people go, oh, but Manson's people killed people. What are you talking about? And I'm like, wait a minute, there's 7 people dead at the Capitol building, right? Exactly. 5 on the day and 2 more suicides within a week. Yeah, 3 police officers dead, 4 protesters dead. You got 7 dead people. And you're telling me that there's not something similar to what Charlie Manson did? That Donald Trump isn't essentially, the political version of Charlie Manson? No, I'm perfectly willing to say that he is.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sitting here. I'm a Canadian, but lived here for 40 years, and I kind of follow the rule of law. But when you see something like this, you go, wait a minute, that's law. How can they're all white people? And I have nothing against the other side. Believe me, I'm not a racist. But these were all white people from the 60s. They were radical from the Vietnam War, as you were too. I mean, you were 17 out in California. Yeah. When you see all that stuff, you go, wait a minute, doesn't that apply to the rest of the country? And all of a sudden... the racial part of it is basically that Donald Trump is creating a white racist cult. Charlie Manson's group was entirely white. Yeah, but I don't think... They were all hippies.
I was going to say, I don't think this is about race, except that Donald Trump really made it about race. And then you get, this kid Kyle Rittenhouse or whatever, Rittenhouse, who goes to Wisconsin, drives up to Wisconsin to kill a couple of people. And now he's being celebrated, and on the right they're raising money for him and all this kind of thing. Really? Anyhow, we're going to continue our conversations into our second hour. Wendell Potter's going to drop by. This is fascinating about how we're being screwed.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
We're reading today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyesa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives jurisprudence or guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So remember when Donald Trump was trying to destroy Obamacare? He wanted to erase everything that America's first black president ever did. And there's no doubt in my mind that this was part of his white supremacist agenda. But it also, was very profitable for the insurance companies. He said, hey, because there were these little bridge plans that could not last more than 90 days, as I recall, where if you lost job A and you were going to job B and it took a month or so for job B's health insurance to kick in, you could buy a short-term plan that would cover you. Well, Trump expanded those to 3 years. So this guy, his name is Corey Dowd. In the spring of 2019, he found himself unemployed. He had left the Peace Corps and he got a new job, but he needed an insurance policy. He bought one of these Trump Care policies, and he thought, hey, gee, it's got $1 million deductible. Monthly premiums are only $100 each. And best of all, the plan promised to cover up to $1 million in claims and a second claim up to $750,000. He said, this is going to be great. He's 31 years old. He ended up with a $33,600 bill. So we got that. We've got these high deductible plans, which are killing Americans. And then, we've got this creeping into the privatization of Medicare. So I wanted to get a professional take on this, somebody who really knows what they're doing. A former health insurance industry executive, Wendell Potter, is now the president for the Center for Health and Democracy. Business for Medicare for All.org is the website. The Twitter handle, Wendell Potter, of course. And Wendell, you're still running Tarbell, too, right?
I sure am. I chair the board for Tarbell. So thanks for mentioning that too, Tom.
Sure. That's TARBELL.org?
That's correct. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So Wendell, tell me about, what's the deal with these kind of 3 categories? I know you wrote an op-ed about, let's start with these high deductible health plans. Your title, Trump's high deductible health plans are killing Americans. Tell us about that.
Well, they continue to kill Americans, and ever since the Affordable Care Act was passed, even before that, but certainly since the Affordable Care Act was passed, deductibles have been creeping up and up and up. And even if you get your coverage through an Obamacare exchange, you could be on the hook if you're an individual for deductibles of $8,500, $8,550, and for a family, the maximum deductible is $17,100. Most people don't
Which could wipe out most American families.
Oh, absolutely. Just about half of Americans don't have $400 in the bank, much less $17,000. So these are just absurd. And just last year, some of those who were involved in crafting the Affordable Care Act acknowledged that that was a big mistake to allow insurance companies to continue to jack up these deductibles, and they increase every year. That was part of the law. And as a consequence, Americans are underinsured. They're not able to pick up their prescriptions in many cases. They can't go to the doctor. If they have to have treatment, go to the emergency room or whatever, they get hit with big bills they can't pay. So a lot of these folks with insurance are winding up in bankruptcy or turning to GoFundMe. It's just an outrageous situation.
Yeah, it really is. It's obscene that this would even happen in the United States. Wendell, by the way, what's the title of your most recent book?
Nation on the Take, How Big Money Corrupts Our Democracy and What We Can Do About It.
That's right. I wanted to be sure to plug that, too, because it's an absolutely brilliant book, Nation on the Take by Wendell Potter. Wendell is our guest right now. Business for FOR, Business for Medicare for All.org. That's the principal website, right, Wendell? Do I have that right?
That's one. I've got another organization that I lead called Center for Health and Democracy.org. And the word democracy is in there. It's related to my last book because advocates for healthcare reform need to understand that the reason why we have such trouble getting the healthcare system we need is because the entrenched special interests, like the industry I used to work for, the health insurance business, spend so much money to influence elections and public policy that they can pretty much call the shots in Washington or the state
And that's
capitol.
not democracy. Yeah, that's not democracy.
You know that.
So, Wendell Potter, tell me about these Medicare Advantage plans. I'm seeing more and more benefits being advertised by Joe Namath on TV, and yet I keep reading articles about people who get essentially screwed when they get really seriously sick or need long-term care, and they have Medicare Advantage plans. What's the story there? We've got about 3.5 minutes to the break.
It's a big scam. It's a big scam. And in my old job in the industry, I used to be a champion for these health plans. I even encouraged my parents to enroll in them. And I found out, and my mother did, is just what the limitations are. You're exactly right. As you get older, a lot of people try to disenroll. In other words, they try to get out of these plans, get back into traditional Medicare. It's not so easy, and I'll address that in a minute. But one of the reasons is because there are such limited providers available to you for long-term care, for skilled nursing care, that you find that the care that you need from the providers you want to see just isn't available to you unless you pay an enormous amount of money out of your own pocket. And these plans are operated exactly like commercial, like regular plans. They have small networks in many cases, very inadequate networks. They require prior authorization, which is another thing that people need to be aware of. That gives the health plan, the insurance company, the ability to say, no, we're not going to cover that. So it's a big scam. The insurance industry, insurance companies have learned how to make money off of this program, though. It's become their big cash cow, and they spend enormous sums of money hiring people like Joe Namath and others to shill for these plans.
So if we were to successfully go to Medicare for All, and Medicare Advantage, which is now about a third of all Americans who have signed up for Medicare, have signed up for one of these Medicare Advantage programs, these scam programs that have been so aggressively promoted by Joe Namath and others on TV. If we were to go to Medicare for All, well, is this going to be the snake in the woodpile or whatever? Is this going to be the thing that ultimately bites us, that attacks us?
It could be, and Congress will have to address that because with improved Medicare for All, which is what we advocate for, there would be no need, no market for these Medicare Advantage plans. The current program, the traditional Medicare program, needs to have more benefits. It does not cover dental or hearing or long-term care. Right. It doesn't cover vision. So that needs to be addressed. And the out-of-pocket obligations are too high, too. So there needs to be a cap on that. You can be certain that the insurance industry will fight that. They make a lot of money on these Medicare supplement plans as well. Almost everyone, not everyone, but those who can afford to buy a supplement policy do with traditional Medicare because it helps you cover your out-of-pocket cost.
Right, that 20%, that skin in the game that the Republicans were insisting on back in the 60s when LBJ put Medicare together.
Exactly. They still talk about skin in the game.
Yeah, and that skin in the game phrase, I mean, that was, I remember those times. I mean, that phrase was on the news every single night. It was like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, if you don't have skin in the game, you're just going to exploit the system. You're just going to live in your doctor's office. That's what you're going to do.
Exactly,
But really that was put into place to provide an opening for the for-profit health insurance companies to make money on Medicare, right?
Oh, it's true. And when the Medicare program was created back in the 60s, it was modeled sort of like after private plans. But healthcare costs back then were not nearly as high as they are now. The programs, both private and public, have not kept up with the rising costs and healthcare costs. Medicare much better than private plans, for sure.
Yeah. Remarkable stuff. Wendell Potter, businessformedicareforall.org, Twitter handle @Wendell Potter, tarbell.org, and what's the other organization, Wendell?
Centerforhealthanddemocracy.org. So check us out.
Centerforhealthanddemocracy.org. And check out Wendell's book, Nation on the Take. Wendell Potter, it's great talking with you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
this
you too.
Is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Thom Hartmann, and please extend to Mrs. Hartmann a belated Mother's Day. Listen,
I will.
I wanted to talk to you about something. I got an idea on how to kneecap white nationalism and the billionaire class. Just simply go back to Dwight Eisenhower's tax rate of 92%, which was 92, 72 down to 27. Just going back to that 92, and I think it will check those guys. In my opinion, Professor, the only thing that money cannot buy is salvation from our Creator. And money does supersede, now let's be straight, it does supersede our values, our principles, loyalty to country, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's Russian money, American money, Chinese money, it's money. Money is buying Fox News, okay? They got nowhere to go in terms of journalism, but they still out there. Money is buying these cyber attacks, okay? Money bought a U.S. president. Okay, now Ralph Nader had this book one time where he was talking about the extreme right and the extreme left coming together. And he had a list of different things that they would all agree on. Well, in terms of our time right now, this afternoon, this morning, I believe we can take a picture of Liz Cheney, Ocasio-Cortez, and Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders and say these are the defenders of democracy. Okay? Now, Miss Cheney is over to the right. These other folks are to the left, but I believe they could stand together on that picture because Miss Cheney, as far as I'm concerned, is a soldier for democracy, even though her father should be in prison, in my opinion. But I believe that's for another conversation.
Yeah, and she supported that war and continues to. Yeah, but still, she is standing up to say that the election was not stolen. Don't believe the big lie, which is a hell of a thing for a Republican to do right now.
You better believe it, my brother, and I appreciate this time. And by the way, that was a good conversation with Wendell Porter. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Morris. It's great to hear from. It's always great to hear from you, George in Palm Desert, California. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I know you touched on the oil industry at the beginning, and I was going to ask if you had seen the documentary Cowspiracy.
You mean Cowspiracy? Isn't it just
Cowspiracy?
One word? Yeah. I have not watched it all the way to the end, but I have seen a good chunk of it. Why?
Well, the short synopsis is that raising animals to kill and eat creates much more pollution than all the fossil fuels, cars, planes, trains, automobiles, ships at sea put together, and that this is really truly the end of mankind.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, George. Factory farming is a mind-bogglingly horrific thing. And not just Americans, but all over the world, people are eating way too much animal protein just for our own health. But then on top of that, the health of the planet. I mean, if people were just to cut down to, you look at hunter-gatherer people, for example, and there's really good documentation on this. Typically, their diet is between 15 and 18% animal protein. Our diets will run as much as 50% animal protein. It's crazy. I mean, it's like, go ahead.
You know what it did for me is I was somewhat of a vegetarian, which I got into during the shelter. After seeing that documentary, I'm full-on vegan now.
Yeah, with the exception of the occasional wild-caught fish, so am I. And absolutely, I've been off dairy products for years, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It's amazing.
That's
My lungs
good for the
cleared
environment.
up. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. George, thank you for the call. We're coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. It's about this movement that has, it's being characterized in the media as being just, fringe wackadoodles, crazy people on YouTube, stuff like that, who are talking about how Democrats are torturing children to get the adrenochrome out of them, and Hillary Clinton is eating babies, and the ship in the Suez Canal, and how, and the really interesting one now, how if you get the vaccine for COVID, that it will change your race. Yes, something that will make white people absolutely hysterical. The problem is, this isn't just the Flat Earth Society. These aren't the people that we used to laugh at. This isn't just a few crazies on the edge. They just had a convention in Oklahoma. A serious convention where they were calling for Democrats to be put in front of a firing squad and shot. You need to check this out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Thinking, oh yeah, I'm good, no problem. And here he is, broke. Another question I wanted to ask is, and this has to do with the article that I wrote over the weekend on Saturday that I published over at Hartmann Report, is why are we amazed by QAnon when the Republican Party was transformed by a psychotic child murderer? I mean, there's literally, the title of the piece that I published on May 8th, on Saturday, over at HartmannReport.com is Americans Must Repudiate the Connection Between a Child Murderer, Reaganism, and Trumpism. And I mean, the seeds of this American brutality all grew out of Ayn Rand's writing, or not all, but largely today. And the Libertarian Party, of course, was started as a scam by a real estate industry lobbying group as a way to justify their idea that they should not be regulated. Real estate, should not be taxed or regulated so they can make more money. But then comes Ayn Rand, right? And Donald Trump was asked in 2015 by USA Today's Kirsten Powers his favorite book. And his favorite book, he said, was The Fountainhead. This is a book by Ayn Rand in which a young woman gets raped and then decides she likes being raped. Trump said, it relates to beauty, business, life, and inner emotions. That book relates to everything. Paul Ryan was requiring everybody on his staff to read it, for example. And Trump says, I identify with Howard Rourke. He's the novelist's protagonist, right, who designs skyscrapers and rages against the establishment. In fact, he was so upset with the government doing things that he literally used dynamite to blow up a public housing project. Because we don't need no stinking public housing projects. But the hero of Ayn Rand was this guy by the name, it's just in her journals, in fact, she lays it out. The hero of her life, of Ayn Rand's life, was this man named William Edward Hickman. He lived in Los Angeles during the Roaring 20s. 10 days before Christmas in 1927, Hickman kidnapped from the Mount Vernon Valley Junior High School the daughter of Perry Parker. He was a wealthy businessman. Her name was Marion, a 12-year-old girl, Marion Parker. Kidnapped her, held her for ransom. He wanted $1,500, which was a year's salary back then. And after 2 days, her dad said, okay, fine, I'll pay you. But by that point in time, he had already murdered this little girl. And he told the paper, and I lay it out. There's parts of it that are just so gruesome I don't want to read on the air. But he talked about how he just couldn't help himself. He just had to kill her. He had to strangle her. And then he had to cut her throat and drain her blood into the sink and then cut her body up into pieces. And then when he went out to meet her father, who was going to pay the ransom, he took a shotgun and he had just her torso and her head with her eyes sewed open so it looked like she was alive in the backseat of his car. And her father comes out and leaves the $1,500 in a satchel on the ground. And Hickman's got this shotgun on him. And then Hickman kicks this dead body, these pieces of this dead body of this guy's daughter out on the street and drives off, and Dad falls to his knees sobbing. So that's who we're talking about. He was the most notorious criminal of the 1920s, of the Roaring '20s. According to the Los Angeles Times, they called him they said it was the most horrible crime of the '20s. But to Ayn Rand, this guy was a hero. She said that Hickman is, quote, the ideal man that she based The Fountainhead, Donald Trump's favorite novel, on. She said his statement that I am like the state, what is good for me is right, resonated deeply with her. This is what she wrote in her diary, Ayn Rand. She said, Hickman is the best and strongest expression of a real man's psychology I've ever heard. This is the monster who hacked up a 12-year-old girl, right? She said the first thing, this is during his trial, she said, the first thing that impresses me about the case is the ferocious rage of the whole society against one man. She said, this is Ayn Rand writing in her diaries about, Hickman. She said, it is not the crime alone that has raised the fury of public hatred. It is the case of daring challenge to society. See, he was unrepentant. He was quite proud of what he did. It is the amazing picture of a man with no regard whatsoever for all that society holds sacred, with a consciousness all his own. Thus, she said, the media turned a brilliant, unusual, exceptional boy into a purposeless monster. She was writing a book at the time. And its hero was a little boy named, or a young man named Danny Renahan. And in her notes on that book, she wrote, the model for Renahan is Hickman. He would be her ideal man. He was born with the spirit of Aragon and the nature of a medieval feudal lord. Imperious, impatient, uncompromising, untamable, intolerant, unadaptable, passionate, intensely proud, superior to the mob, an extreme extremist, no respect for anyone or anything. That was Ayn Rand's hero that she based her novels on. At least two of them. And she is the hero that the Republican Party bases its policies of thoughtful, intelligent greed. Greed is good. Greed will drive things. Greed is the power behind capitalism, don't you know? This is what the GOP is all about, sadly.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And then Trump came along and in the language of the 21st century, essentially said the same thing that Ayn Rand did.
For our book club today, we're reading from Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing. So I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling on what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who was one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious long to reign over us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders. We've furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices could be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the Fed's discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them with little more than a polite request that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling, paying it, and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The arrangement Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron? The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different plan for their disposable income, activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media properties to run experiments on human credulity. Rendezvous with Oblivion is
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Well, the Confederacy continues to live. Governor Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, just signed a proclamation making April the Confederate Heritage Month in Mississippi. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is that it didn't get published on the state's websites. It got published over on Facebook, where there's a good contingent of racists and neo-Confederates to begin with. But what does this say about America, that a part of the country that literally was a police state, a fascist police state, there was no democracy left by 1861 in the South. It was completely controlled by a few thousand families who owned these massive plantations. And in my little riff that's over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program, I go through some of the details of it. Just the sad, sad history of the South. It is really worth checking out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It is 35 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. And I want to get into Josh Hawley. I'll do that in the next hour, I think. Right now, there's still a lot, that is right in front of us. Terry in Helena, Montana. Hey, Terry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I read your last night. I read your article about the Republican Christian fascist push, bring fascism, full fascism to America. Well, they're starting already, and I just got a text from a part, I forget which organization here, but the legislature has placed a bill called HB 481 on Governor Gianforte's desk, which forbids protests and restricts, actually abolishes First Amendment rights. My question is,
wow,
how do I'm only one person, but I'm not going to let somebody take away my rights without a fight. Now I'm 68. I'm on seven types of meds, and I know if I get arrested, the cops aren't going to allow me to have my meds. So I don't know whether to do the...
Yeah, you don't want to go out in the streets in your condition, Terry, but there are still a lot of things you can do, and there are a lot of great organizations that you can join, including the local Democratic Party, which is doing all of what they're doing now virtually. But this attempted fascist takeover of the United States, this attempt to roll back the Constitution by making it legal to kill protesters with your car, making it illegal to protest, you stay one step into the street and 15 years in prison, which is now apparently about to be signed in Montana and has already passed in Florida and I believe Iowa, and I think it's on the governor's desk in Texas. These kind of things are happening all over the country. And you're absolutely right. It is the rise of a new form of a neo-fascist movement in the United States, this taking over the red states. In addition to, and perhaps most troubling, the election so-called reforms that they're passing that take the counting of the votes away from the ultimate count, the ultimate certification of the vote, away from professionals voting, people, bureaucrats within the state who have been doing this for 20, 30 years, election after election, completely transparent. They know what they're doing. They're trained to do it. Taking it away from them and giving it to political hacks. In every case, Republicans, because these are all states Republicans control. I think the thing to do is to be working for local Democratic victories. Find a local Democrat, and because this is going to be both a short game. Hopefully we can stop an awful lot of this in 2022 and 2024, and a long game. We need to be rolling back these kinds of laws. We need to be putting into place legislation that enhances and strengthens and supports the First Amendment. Our right to protest, the right of people peaceably to assemble and petition their government for redress of grievance. I'm sorry, Terry. What were you going to say?
I said I was born 20 years after the conclusion of the Second World War. I remember the phases. I used to go. We used to go to the theater to watch cowboys and cartoons, and they would show these newsreels. And on television, World at War. I remember the faces.
Oh yeah, about what the fascists were like. Yeah, what World War II, and that's what's happening. I mean, it's the same ideology, it's the same philosophy. It's so sad. But Terry, I would start locally. There's also groups like MoveOn.org and Indivisible.org and Progressive Democrats for America, PDA.org. There's a bunch of great groups out there that you can join, and help out from home, so you don't need to worry about not having access to your meds and things like that. Good. Thanks for the call, Terry. By the way, Carl in Chicago. Hey, Carl, your thoughts?
Hi. This is about Bush and his fake war in Iraq. I got some information that it was interesting. The Bush was so afraid, and the Bush family was so afraid that he was going to be prosecuted for a fake war and losing 5,000 lives and trillions of dollars, that the Bush family, supposedly Jenna Bush, purchased 100,000 acres of land in Paraguay. Why Paraguay? Well, number one, we have a military base in Paraguay, and number two, there's no extradition for political refugees in Paraguay, only for murder. This was a potential refuge for George Bush if things really went bad and he was held accountable for the fake war with the aluminum tubes and the yellow.
I remember when that story came out, Carl, during the last years of the Bush presidency, and I was never able to confirm it. I mean, it was all over the news. There were dozens of different news reports about it, but has it been confirmed that the Bush family bought that land in Paraguay? And number one. And number two, I mean, the largest holder of land in the entire United States right now is Bill Gates. He's got hundreds of thousands of acres, but he buys it for investments. He buys it because the price of land is going up. So how do you know that the Bush family, if they did buy that land in Paraguay, didn't just do it as an investment?
Well, it was interesting because no details came out of it why Jenna Bush was supposedly the one that bought the land in Paraguay. And there was no details on, okay, if it was an investment, how are things going on that investment? What happened to the investment? It would be a great movie if somebody wanted to pick it up.
It may be. But I can't say for sure that it's anything more than a conspiracy theory, and it may well just be that. Hopefully this kind of stuff will shake out. Alan in Crown Point, Indiana. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind?
Yeah, should we consider opening up the South Dakota pipeline with a cyber attack on the eastern coast? Would that make sense?
It's not going to get the oil where you want it, number one. Number two, that pipeline's not completed. Number three, that pipeline carries a type of oil. It's basically ground up and crushed coal. It's a slurry, not even really oil. The tar sands oil. It carries a type of oil that can't be refined by any of the refineries on the East Coast. The major refinery that refines this kind of oil is owned by the Koch brothers, or at least used to be, I assume it still is, down on the Texas coast. And that's why this pipeline was going to go from Canada down to the Texas coast. And they have the refinery, and the reason they built that refinery there is because Venezuela has the same kind of oil. And they've been processing Venezuelan oil there for years and years and years and converting it into gasoline and diesel fuel and things like that. And then the waste, of course, just goes into the air and into the ocean and into Texas and Louisiana. So we get the waste, and then they export the finished, the refined products. And in fact, during the Trump administration, they actually changed the export regulations around exporting crude oil from the United States. It used to be illegal to export crude oil from the United States, but we have such a surplus of it. But so no, Alan, number one, it's the wrong kind of oil. Number two, the pipeline isn't done. Number three, this was really all done, as far as I can tell, for the benefit of Koch Industries, and they're down in Texas. So I don't think it's going to help at all. Jan in Etna Green, Indiana. Hey, Jan, what's up?
Well, you've covered a lot of subjects today, Tom, but my concern is about local politics. Mm-hmm. I live in a largely agrarian area of northern Indiana, and Big Ag moved in about 20 years ago, and then came the irrigation pumps. So now I'm sitting on what the latest tax assessment was of $23,000 for 0.68 acre of land, and yet my Big Ag farmer neighbor across the road, his land is assessed at $1,290. Now, I don't mind funding public education in the least bit, but here in Indiana, once again, Republicans pretty much own the state, and
so the farmers get to value their property for the purposes of property taxes in a different way, in other words.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that does. Yeah.
Do
that,
you have any input to do?
I don't. I mean, in the era of factory farm or of family farms, excuse me, I think there might have been some kind of a justification for that. But in the era of factory farms, these are giant industrial operations. They should be paying their damn taxes, Jan.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And if they did pay their damn taxes, then Jan's property taxes wouldn't be so high. And now she can only deduct 10 grand of it on her federal taxes. And welcome back. Anthony in Seattle. Hey, Anthony, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Very quickly, I'm a 71-year-old man with what appears to be prostate cancer that when I was 70, I went in and was denied coverage by regular Medicare, even for the diagnostics, and then sent a letter back when we appealed that they wouldn't pay for any future treatments involved, because they literally said if a 70-year-old man's lifespan isn't worth paying the money for.
Anthony, regular Medicare does not say those kind of things, number one. And number two, they don't generally do those kinds of things. The company, the kind of Medicare that requires pre-authorization for tests is not regular Medicare. That is Medicare Advantage. You are confusing things. Tony in Puyallup, Washington. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind?
Oh, a couple things. Thank you for taking my call, Tom.
Sure.
There's some strange little things that pop up on my on my phone. Sometimes it says "Keep Trump from running again for office" sign here, or "Take Ted Cruz out of office" and sign. Are those legitimate, or are they just some kind of weird thing where they want to identify progressive?
Some of them may be trying to steal your identity or your money, but most of them are probably just trying to get you to contribute money to them or react in a way that they know that you're a real person, so that they can sell your name or your phone number or your email address to other companies that will then try to scam you.
Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't answer.
I don't respond to any of those things. If it's not somebody that I know. In fact, I've got my phone set so it doesn't even ring if it's not somebody in my contact list, and and text messages and all that kind of stuff. So you have to be very, very careful. There's a lot of that going on in email as well. So
yeah, well, I think that's where it was. Anyway, quickly, the other day you were saying how to reach the White House to ask the president to lean on these people about what do you call it? The when they talk and what do you call that?
Oh, the filibuster.
Filibuster. Yeah. And you said that the line you gave us over the radio that was not taking calls anymore, and you could go to White House something. I missed what you said.
Gov.
Where you could just White House.
Whitehouse.gov, G-O-V, yep, whitehouse.gov, and there is a contact us button there, and there's a form you fill out with your name and your address and your email address, and then a big box where you send your message. Keep it short, keep it to the point, keep it to a single point. If you have multiple things that you want to tell the White House about, send them multiple emails. Don't try to put them all into one email. Because they'll be handled the same way the phone calls are. Some intern is going to tick them up on a spreadsheet, basically. And they're going to say, okay, we got, 30 people in favor of this, but 50 people opposed to it. So, and that kind of thing. But it's whitehouse.gov, Tony.
Well, I wish you would announce that every day on your show, every day to remind people.
I will do it more often, I promise.
Yeah.
Tony, thank you. Thank you for the call. It is coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. By the way, we have lines open. I know a lot of people sometimes are waiting to call in. There are several lines open right now if you want to try and get through, if there's anything you want to say about any of these topics that we're talking about, or broadly anything today. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Ask a boomer what it was like going to college back in the 60s and 70s and whether they had to go into debt to do it. And odds are they'll tell you that they not only didn't have to go into debt, in fact, college was free in California until Ronald Reagan became governor. Not only did they not have to go into debt, but you could pretty much work your way through college just with a part-time job. That is very much no longer the case. Only 8% of millennials and Gen Xers have never had a student loan. This is a crushing burden on these two generations, and it's time to clean it up. And when Americans were asked, what do you think? Should we just wipe the slate clean? Should we get rid of all this student debt? 60% of Americans said yes. And then, of course, the corollary to that would be, and then let's make college free, at least state colleges and community colleges. There's a whole video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. You can check it out there. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Mike in Summit Hill, Pennsylvania. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Thom, it's Justin.
Oh, it's Justin.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It is Justin. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem. You were wondering about the Republicans and that sort of stuff and how to combat them best. Honestly, I think the best way to do it is by knocking out the people that got knocked out in Georgia, Loeffler and Purdue, by having people put in an emoluments clause to their aspect, so they are not going to be in business, so their business will not be first off to profit from stuff. I mean, because we all know that the regulators should not be in business.
Right. So, see, you're talking about people like Betsy DeVos and Elaine Chao who are profiting off being in Trump's cabinet, or you're talking about you mentioned Kelly Loeffler, the senator from Georgia, whose husband owns the New York Stock Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
People like that, like Loeffler, Manchin.
I think the emoluments clause already covers them. It's just that it's not enforced.
Well, I mean, even if it does cover it, I mean, we should be pronouncing this because the fact is that we all know that government should not be in private business, because if it's in private business, it'll favor the private business.
Yeah, well, or let's rephrase that. People who have what used to be called personality interests, in other words, they have great wealth, should not be in a position to run government unless they put that wealth in a blind trust, which is what Jimmy Carter did when he became president. It's what Jack Kennedy did. It's what Richard Nixon did, for God's sake. But it's what Trump refused to do. I mean, he broke a long-standing tradition. And Justin, I'm with you, and I think it should apply to people like Kelly Loeffler as well. Patricia in Greeley, Colorado. Hey, Patricia, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I want to ask about the filibuster, the traditional filibuster, where somebody talks a long time. I want to know what happens at the end when the person who's talking gives up, or when there's less than 41 people. When does it go for a vote, or when does it just stop? It would
go for a vote as soon as somebody says, "I call for the vote," and then there would be the vote. If we were going to go to the Jimmy Stewart style filibuster, it would go to the vote the minute that they have fewer than 40 people on the floor, or nobody is talking. And at that point, somebody on the other side would stand up and say, "I call for a vote," and the vote would have to happen. The way it works right now is Mitch McConnell just, sends an email to Chuck Schumer saying, we object to this legislation. And Chuck Schumer can't do anything until he gets 60 people to say, no, we're going to pass it. And I think that's backwards. I think it should be working the other way around. Patricia, thank you for the call. Mark in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, you're from Michigan, and maybe you knew this already and didn't want to get into it with the caller who said that Ford Motor Company built their largest plant in Russia in the late 20s. Right. The truth is, Ford Motor Company built and opened the largest industrial complex in the world in southeast Michigan, the Rouge Complex, in 1929.
That makes sense to me. Having grown up in Michigan. I have no idea what they did in Russia, It's back in the 20s. I mean, it's just... Go ahead.
All I'm saying is that factory was the most amazing factory in the world at that point. They took in raw material. Oh, yeah. They made rubber, they made tires, they made glass, they made steel. My grandfather came in 1910 from Lebanon, and he worked in the Rouge Steel factory for 50 years.
Wow.
And that place was an amazing place. It was like hell inside. It was several stories high inside with catwalks all around the side. I took a tour of it once, and you could see the smelters and the steel pouring and all that stuff. Amazing things. Anyway, that's the truth. Yeah. You can look it up. Yeah. And I just wanted to...
Yeah, they went from literally the raw material for rubber, the raw material for steel, iron ore, the raw material for the raw wood coming in that they would make, steering wheels and things out of, and they converted it all in this giant complex into cars. I mean,
they made glass, they made rubber, they made tires, they made steel, they made everything.
It's breathtaking, and now it's all gone. I mean, the Rouge is completely shut down now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no. There are still parts of it. There's an assembly plant that still works, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, there is. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. I worked in the Ford assembly plant in college, and in 1981, and we were putting together Mustangs and Capris, and in those days, the cars were so low quality. The cars were so low quality at that time that they had, at the end of the assembly line, we were making over 60 cars an hour. And at the end of the line, you would see a whole slew of these Mustangs and Capris were pushed to the side of the line with the hoods open, because normally you drive a car off the line. They couldn't start. A huge percentage of them. And they had mechanics working on them at the end of the line, a whole line of cars, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway,
amazing. Well, I think they've gotten a lot more precise. Their precision engineering is much better now. Mark, thank you for the call. The stories we all can tell, right? We'll be back. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Here coming up in our third hour, QAnon.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book for today is Kickback, Exposing the Global Corporate Bribery Network by David Montero. This is from the introduction, Chapter 1. During Watergate, the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate Richard Nixon's alleged tampering with elections was intended to mark the close of a sordid chapter in American history. Instead, that effort, culminating in Nixon's resignation, would prove to be only the beginning of a deeper political morass that America would face for decades to come. Congressional investigations would uncover for the first time that multinational corporations, through slush funds and bribes, were not only secretly funding political organizations at home, like Nixon's re-election campaign, but corrupting foreign officials abroad. This new perspective on the corporate abuse of power and its impact overseas would result in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FPCA, groundbreaking legislation that, by prohibiting commercial bribery for the first time in history, sought to change how capitalism and political affairs were conducted all around the world. Now, more than 40 years later, we are experiencing a kind of déjà vu as the special counsel investigates whether the president allegedly abused his power, again by obstructing an inquiry into a possible manipulation of our country's elections. Just as was the case in Watergate, whatever special counsel Robert Mueller uncovers will likely mark the beginning, rather than the end, of a reassessment of how power actually operates in this country. And just as in Watergate, there's the possibility that Mueller's far-reaching probe may reveal how tightly political corruption and corporate corruption are linked through bribery, just under the surface of America's political life. Nixon was the recipient of secret corporate donations, which were considered illegal because they should have been disclosed. But the payments, while unlawful, did not compromise the presidential election itself. Mueller's Russian inquiry is directed at a potentially far more serious crime, whether Donald Trump, the head of a sprawling business empire, colluded with a foreign power to deliberately sway the American electorate, committing the very crime that the FCPA had been trying to eradicate since Watergate, the offer of a foreign bribe, a kickback. That law specifically states that a corporate bribe need not involve an actual exchange of money. An offer of anything of value, such as a promise to a foreign government official, is sufficient to violate its terms. This is precisely what Mueller is trying to ascertain, whether Trump, his company, his associates, or his family, or some combination of them, offered a promise to Russian government officials, a quid pro quo, that if they helped Trump by manipulating the elections, Trump, if victorious, would ease U.S. sanctions against Russia. Doing so would allow greater U.S. investment of Russia and would benefit Russian officials and oligarchs, the Trump business organization, the corporate interests of the Trump family, and former members of his senior staff, including Paul Manafort, his one-time campaign chairman, and Michael Flynn, his disgraced national security advisor. If the Trump organization or anyone connected with it did make such a promise, and depending on how that promise was conveyed to Russian officials, the Justice Department would have strong grounds for pursuing an FCPA charge, among others. An FCPA violation is within Mueller's mandate to investigate, quote, any matters that arose or may arise directly from this investigation. As has been widely observed, Mueller has hired 2 former federal law enforcement officials with extensive experience in investigating fraud, money laundering, and overseas bribery. Andrew Weissman, who ran the Justice Department's fraud section, which enforces the FCPA, and Greg Andres, who helped oversee FCPA policy in the criminal division. The drama playing out in Washington starkly highlights the fact that foreign corporate bribery can be a deeply misleading term. We've come to regard it, when we think of it at all, as something that unscrupulous companies do in distant countries, so that any impact it has must be contained overseas. If a corporation pays kickbacks to a greedy government official abroad, why should we be concerned? But in a highly interconnected world, bound together by a global market, a global financial system, and the constant migration of peoples, goods, capital, corruption rarely stays out there. Bribes eventually harm Americans, American society, American values, and American interests, both domestically and around the world, in ways that are difficult to gauge. Why do firms resort to bribery? The obvious reason is to gain an advantage over their competitors. But illicit payments also buy the illusion of growth in the short term, of increased market share and inflated firm value. It does not take into account the harm that this practice causes to companies themselves, sinking employee morale, diminished profit margins, and the possibility of hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and penalties, not to mention a reputation that will be associated with corruption and deceit. They also effectively steal the public's money because the majority of bribery cases involve capital-intensive development and infrastructure projects such as roads, dams, defense systems, oil extraction, or mining that are publicly funded. To recoup the bribes involved in winning such contracts, companies conspire with foreign officials to inflate the costs, sometimes by 10 or even hundreds of millions of dollars. While the companies and the officials win out, taxpayers are left shouldering the burden. Corporate bribes involve a remarkable amount of money. The World Bank has estimated $1 trillion a year, although this may represent the high end. Others have placed the market at 10% of the $4 trillion spent annually on global public procurement. The book Kickback by David Montero.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Biden addressed the economy a few minutes ago as the Republicans, in fact, there was one of these, Jen Psaki was, I think it was Peter Doocy from Fox News was like, well, what are you going to do about the fact that people don't want to go back to work because they're making so much money on unemployment? And she's like, really? You're trying to sell that crap to us here in the White House? Seriously? Come on. You know, people are not vaccinated. People don't have child care. There's all these, you know, Bernie's response I thought was brilliant. You know, he said, we don't need to do away with $300 a week in unemployment benefits. We need to do away with, I'm paraphrasing here, we need to do away with starvation wages. I mean, you want people to come back to work? Pay them decently. Gee, what a novel idea. Never thought of that. Yeah. Step one. But, you know, one of the questions I wanted to ask and just, you know, generally tossed into the conversation that we're having today is last Tuesday, the Washington Post hosted this live video chat with Josh Hawley. And it's like, really? Josh Hawley? A live video chat? I mean, this is the guy who did the fist bump, right? Or the, you know, pumping his hand in the air about, you know, yeah, we want to, you know, go out there and take on, you know, whatever, right? Take the Capitol, take it down. There is something fundamentally wrong, in my opinion, with the media treating Josh Hawley like everything is normal, right? Not asking him, well, wait a minute, why did you do that? What, you know, what's going on? Why is it that nobody, that, you know, that nobody's holding this guy accountable? And it's not just the Post. This is he has a new book out about the tyranny of big tech, and so the Washington Post is, you know, asking him about his book, but and his supposed reputation for, quote, for taking on the big and powerful to protect Missouri workers as a fierce defender of the Constitution. Right. This is the guy who tried to assault the Constitution. What am I missing here? Is there some piece of this that I'm just like too dense to get? I mean, on CBS This Morning last week, and by the way, the guy who wrote the piece about this is Jake Johnson over at Common Dreams, and it's just a brilliant piece. CBS This Morning interviewed Rick Scott. Rick Scott is, you know, not only was the head of the healthcare company in Florida that was accused and then convicted of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of the United States. He took his money and he ran with that money and used that money to become governor of Florida, and now he's the senator from Florida. And I guarantee you in 2024 he will be one of the nominees, one of the candidates for president of the United States on the Republican side if Donald Trump doesn't succeed in pushing everybody out of that race. But he was also one of the guys who was a big enthusiast for overturning the election and keeping Donald Trump in the White House. Rick Scott, this multimillionaire from Florida, the healthcare scam guy. And he was interviewed on CBS this morning. And they didn't ask him a single question about why do you support sedition? Are you, sir, still a traitor? What's going on here? Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, Kevin McCarthy, these guys all regularly appear on television. And the first question is never, are you still a traitor, sir? Do you still support sedition? What's happening to our media? See, this is the process. We had a lot of conversations about this back in the early Trump years. Actually, even in 2016, during the primary and during the general election, was this idea of normalization, of normalizing the things that under other circumstances we would be shocked by, we would be horrified by. You know, the president talking about, oh, yeah, no, I didn't rape that woman. She's not good enough for me. I mean, Trump's essential argument in the E. Jean Carroll case, where she's accusing him of rape, and his answer was, she's not my type, right? Not worthy of raping. I mean, can you imagine if Barack Obama had said that? And that's like one thing out of 500. And now we have sedition. Now we have actual treason, an actual attempt to overthrow the government of the United States that was led in part by members of Congress, by Ted Cruz, by Josh Hawley, by Rick Scott, over in the House. And you have Kevin McCarthy, who's scared to death about having to testify. He is fighting a commission to study January 6th because he was the guy who was on the phone with Donald Trump begging him to call off his people, his brown shirts or red shirts or his red hats, I guess we should call them. He was Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, the House Minority Leader, on the phone on January 6th while the Capitol was under siege by 1,000 or more traitors who were trying to overthrow the United States. And by the way, the research is in. The vast majority of these people came from counties that saw the largest declines in white populations in the United States. This is all about white supremacy and the great replacement theory that Tucker Carlson is promoting over on Fox so-called News. As it was in 1861. It's all about white supremacy. And nobody's asking these white guys who are supporting this white supremacist coup, who supported an attempt to overthrow the United States, who supported open treason against the United States. Why are you still in Congress? Why are we talking to you about big tech, Senator Hawley? Shouldn't we be talking about treason? I mean, what am I missing here? Was there like something that happened in the media that just all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, this is no big deal? How did this become normalized? I get it over on Fox News, right? They've got, entire shows devoted to, and Donald Trump coming on going, oh, yeah, my people were the hugging and kissing the police, right? That's why 140 of them ended up in the hospital. 3 of them dead because Trump's people were hugging and kissing them. But over on Fox News, it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's all good. Nothing to worry about. On right-wing hate radio, oh, those are some patriots worried about the future of America. Right. These people need to stop looking at people of color and freaking out and saying, oh my God, here they come, and start looking at the billionaires who are manipulating them and robbing them blind, using their racial fears as a weapon against them, and they don't even realize it. They do not realize the extent, the level to which they are being manipulated by these people. And I think it's an American tragedy. I don't have a better phrase to describe it. I think it is literally a tragedy. But I guess the question is, why is the media not treating these insurrectionists as criminals or as alleged criminals at the very least? You know, Senator Hawley, it's alleged that you committed treason or that you supported treason or sedition. Let's talk about that. It's not happening. What the hell's going on? We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And keep your eye on this pipeline, by the way. This is going to be a bigger story than I think most people realize. We'll be back. Stick around. It's coming up it is 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. David in Lakewood, Colorado. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Well, good morning, and, longtime listener by way of Smirking Chimp, thank you for your continued existence. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome, David.
Anyway, so enough about that. The biggest thing is that I am like 64 3/4 years old, being a $2 million man because of expensive but employer-paid health care with various medical issues and stuff like that. I'm just sitting here going, okay, great. Now I get to figure this thing out. And, I definitely understand that if I can safely keep the system of what's been going on at arm's length and celebrate a certain amount of personal freedom by not having to be tied down to a job. Currently, I'm blowing through some of my retirement just to survive a little bit through all this, and I'm paying for health care on the open market, although it's cheap, because I try to keep. Yeah, but I try to keep.
Yeah, but your question's about Medicare,
money
right?
out of. My income is low enough; it isn't that much, so.
Yeah.
I consider myself lucky.
So so David, what's your question?
My question is that, basically I'm pretty much leaning on the fact that I need to kind of ignore the Medicare Advantage thing. And I guess, what do I do with that 20%?
Okay, great question. First of all, yes, you're right. Medicare Advantage is a scam. These are privatized health insurance programs that are run by big insurance companies. They're very profitable to them. They seem great when you're healthy. When you get sick, they can be a screaming disaster. So that leaves you with regular Medicare. Regular Medicare only covers 80% of your expenses. And so you sign up through Social Security and the Medicare office for regular Medicare. And then you buy what's called a Medigap policy, GAP, because it covers that 20% gap. And there are multiple companies that offer Medigap policies. The ones that are offered through AARP, I'm pretty sure, are from United Healthcare because they've got to deal with each other. I'm not a fan of that company, but they're there. Liberty Mutual offers some of the real, I think some of the best in the country. Most of your health insurance companies have Medigap plans, in some cases in addition to Medicare Advantage plans. And the Medigap plans are standardized. There's plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I think I'm on plan H, right? And used to be on plan E. And the different plans have different limits of what they're going to cost the company, and they have different prices. But the benefit, the advantage, David, is there's no fine print. There's no got you. The companies, unlike Medicare Advantage, can't change the rules in the middle of the game and send you a new notice of changes. These are standards and regulations and rules that are established by the federal government. So, I would pick a company and pick one of those plans. If it was me, I can't tell you what to do, but and just sign up for regular Medicare. Did I answer your question, David?
Yeah, you did very well. Hey, and 73 and 88 from a 75-meter sideband veteran. I can't believe
that's great. I used to love 80-meter CW. 73s, David. Thanks. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So there's a new study that has, this is not peer-reviewed, but it is in preprint. It is being peer-reviewed as we speak, where the scientists were looking at the ability of the COVID virus to jump from the human species. You know, it started with bats, and then it apparently went to pangolins and then to humans. To jump from humans to other species, which would be a big problem. If we can infect other mammals, you know, our cats and dogs, if we can infect rats or mice, who have traditionally been disease vectors for all kinds of things, from the bubonic plague to hantavirus, if we can infect them with this virus, we've got a whole brand new problem. And sure enough, they have found that these two variants, B351 and P1, both can infect mice in the laboratory. And they say this abrogation of the species barrier represents, you know, a serious problem. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I just continue to be baffled by this. I just don't get it. But anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here and see what's on your mind. Melissa in St. Charles, Illinois. Hey, Melissa, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I am fine, thank you. What's on your mind?
This is the first time I'm ever calling you. I think I've learned more from you than anything. I've kind of started out as an empty bucket in politics. I grew up a single mother family. Never really knew anything about politics, and I rented Screwed from the library, listened to that audiobook, and thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I've been noticing everyone I know is delusional. They live in the Fox and Facebook world, and I recently lost a boyfriend to the QAnon rabbit hole.
Oh, no.
And, yeah, I mean, very interesting, very interesting. Didn't know anything about it, and now I know way more than I would want to. And I kind of just wanted to reach out to you and ask you to kind of give us a little more help on the low end of the income bracket, I guess, where, you know, families are single parents, they're taking care of their elderly parents as they're dying, and they just don't know anything. The very first time I ever voted was for Obama, and I was 38 years old. And the reason I didn't vote before that is because I didn't feel like I knew anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Melissa, you know, thank you for informing yourself and for catching up, you know, with what's going on and for your kind words. But you said help for, you know, people on the bottom. I mean, one of the policies that immediately comes to mind is that, and Bernie's been advocating this for 20 years. I mean, every one of the 11 years he was on the show, he would talk about it, is making sure that Medicaid, which is what typically covers people in nursing homes, elderly folks, that Medicaid would offer benefits to family to keep elderly people in their homes, rather than simply putting them in.
I'm worried too much
homes.
about financial help or whatever, more like the bullet points. Like if you look at the right-wing people, how they talk, they're repeating these bullet points and they're hypnotizing everyone that I know. And then you look at the left side and we have this long, thoughtful, very educated, smart conversation, which in the end sounds like blah, 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 and people fall asleep. So how do I even talk to anybody in my family anymore who is telling me that Democrats are killing babies and they say the word regulations, like that I should be so against regulations? And I'm trying to say, well, what about meat? And what about chickens? Like, I mean, and what about, we need regulations, but I don't have enough education in my arsenal.
Okay, so here's some bullet points for you. You know, regulations are protections. If you don't want this company, you want to do away with our protection, the protection of the quality of our air, so that we have to breathe poisoned air so that this company can make more money? Oh, you want to do away with the protection of our water supply so that the coal mines, and power plants can dump more crap in our water? You want to do away with the protections of predictable drugs or clean food, safe food? That seems crazy to me. That would be my response to anybody who's going off on regulations. If they've got a specific regulation, then you may have a different argument. In terms of things like healthcare, why is it that in every other developed country in the world, nobody goes broke because they get sick? It doesn't happen. We had 600,000 people in America go broke last year, literally have to declare bankruptcy, probably millions of families. In that broad category, 600,000 of them ended up having to go to court to declare bankruptcy because somebody in their family got sick. The number of people in Canada last year who declared bankruptcy because somebody in their family got sick was 0. The number of people in Germany last year who had to declare bankruptcy because somebody in their family got sick was 0. Why can't we have what the rest of the world has? I realize that billionaires don't want their taxes to go up to help pay for it. Screw them. That's a little more than a bullet point, but, there you go. I would probably have to respond, Melissa, to specific arguments, and if you have a couple you want to toss at me, we've got about a minute to the break. Feel free.
No, that's very helpful. I do want to mention, because I know you and Louise watch Cagney and Lacey a lot, I've been watching Nanny 911, which is also an old show, and they send a nanny over to America, and you kind of get a glimpse in how American children are raised, and a lot of them are babysat by video games, where they play violent video games for hours at a time and never learn anything. So I really, really appreciate what you do, Tom, and God bless both you and Louise and your pets.
Okay. Nanny 911. That's interesting. Is that on BritBox?
I think it's on Gabble.
Oh, okay. I don't know about that, but I'll have to check it out. Melissa, thank you. Thanks for your kind words, and good luck. It's great to let me welcome another activist into the fold, another person who cares about democracy and the fate and future of America. It's such a good thing. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls after this short break, as they say in television land or radio land. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Legacy of Secrecy, The Long Shadow of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron and me. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963 triggered cover-ups by officials, this is from the introduction, by the way, that continue to negatively impact American politics, life, and foreign policy. Legacy of Secrecy details those cover-ups and hidden investigations, many for the first time, including the reasons they were carried out under such intense secrecy. Most were spawned by John and Robert Kennedy's top-secret 1963 plan to stage a coup against Fidel Castro, a plan so highly classified that it only started to be exposed in 2005 and is finally revealed in this book. Their own confessions now show the three mafia bosses, Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante, and Johnny Roselli, were behind JFK's assassination. They used parts of the secret coup plan to kill JFK in a way that forced Attorney General Robert Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and high CIA official Richard Helms to withhold critical information not only from the public and the press, but also from each other and sometimes their own investigators. It's important to keep in mind that JFK was murdered just a year after the tense nuclear standoff during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The main goals of U.S. officials were to prevent a nuclear confrontation with the Soviets and to protect JFK's ally high up in the Cuban government, Commander Juan Almeida, head of the Cuban Army in 1963, still listed as Cuba's #3 official today.
While U.S. leaders have managed to prevent a confrontation with Russia and preserve a critical ally in the Cuban government, this limited the investigation into JFK's murder, allowing the 3 mafia chiefs and their associates to remain free. As a result, the long shadow of secrecy surrounding both JFK's murder and the coup plan set the stage for the murder of Martin Luther King, ultimately driving 2 presidents from office and bringing about the murders of 5 congressional witnesses in the mid-1970s. Legacy of secrecy breaks excuse me, important new ground in key areas, detailing for the first time Louisiana Godfather Carlos Marcello's clear confession to ordering JFK's assassination. Marcello's criminal empire ranged from Dallas to Memphis, and previously secret files at the National Archives have shown that he made this confession in 1985 to an FBI informant ruled credible by a federal judge as part of a secret FBI undercover sting operation named Camtex. Exposed here for the first time, Camtex yielded Marcello's admission that he'd met Lee Harvey Oswald and set Jack Ruby up in business in Dallas. The operation also generated hundreds of hours of heretofore secret prison audio tapes of Marcello discussing his crimes, recorded using the FBI informant's bugged transistor radio. Yet the FBI and Justice Department withheld most of that information from the public and Congress for years until its revelation in this book. Carlos Marcello wasn't the only mob boss who confessed his involvement in JFK's murder to a trusted associate. Legacy also uncovers important new information about Marcello's partners in JFK's assassination, Tampa Godfather Santos Trafficante and Johnny Roselli, the Chicago Mafia's man in Las Vegas and Hollywood. Shortly before their deaths, both mobsters admitted their roles in JFK's murder to their attorneys. 2 of their associates with documented ties to the secret JFK Almaheda coup plan likewise confessed. Using exclusive new information supported by FBI files apparently withheld from Congress, this book names 2 of the Georgia men who paid James Earl Ray to kill the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, white supremacist Joseph Miltier and Hugh R. Spake. Miltier, who had been involved in Marcello's murder of JFK, was part of a small clique of racists in Atlanta who used Marcello to broker the contract to murder Dr. King. We document James Earl Ray's ties to Marcello's heroin smuggling operation and long overlooked evidence in FBI files linking Ray to Marcello's associate, Johnny Roselli. Finally, this book explains why Ray, while fleeing to Canada the day after killing Dr. King in Memphis, made a 400-plus mile detour south to Atlanta, where he contacted Spake to get help from Miltier. In 1979, the last congressional committee to investigate the murders of JFK and Dr. King, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, concluded, quote, that Trafficante, like Marcello, had the motive, means, and opportunity to assassinate President Kennedy, end of quote from the congressional report. The HSCA had been created in the wake of Roselli's sensational murder, but the HSCA was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. And the same was true for Trafficante and Roselli, because the CIA, FBI, and other federal agencies withheld so many relevant files. The HSCA, headed by civil rights figure Louis Stokes, also concluded there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of Dr. King and that financial gain was James Earl Ray's primary motivation. But they were unable to determine who had paid Ray or how the conspiracy had worked because the FBI and other agencies had hid critical files. With the help of more than 24 associates of John and Robert Kennedy, backed up by thousands of recently released documents at the National Archives, many of which are quoted here for the first time, Legacy tells the full story denied to Congress and the American people, Legacy of Secrecy.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Dell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's a new video over at thomhartmann.com. And 35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Diana in Sanford, Maine. Hey, Diana, you wanted to talk about Ayn Rand and the GOP?
Yes. Hi, Tom. I don't want to repeat what another lady caller about all I have learned from you. Every time I watch you, it's just amazing. The things that I never knew before and I do now. And like even with Ayn Rand, I just wanted to kind of like, I was not aware of the connection with the Republican Party, the GOP's and her and Trump. I thought he was only connected to like the World Order book of propaganda.
Paul Ryan, when he was Speaker of the House, required his new interns to read Ayn Rand's books. It was a requirement of employment. I mean, that's how deeply embedded she is in the Republican Party, dead though she is. Yes.
And I did remember him being a fan, but I did not know that it was required or went that.
It's institutionalized essentially.
To it, and I did not know how evil she was.
I think she was a sociopath. I think that she was disconnected from reality. I don't know if she was broken by her childhood experience. She was 12 years old when the Bolsheviks took her father's pharmacy away from them and rendered them homeless. Or if she was just born that way. I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what causes a sociopath or a psychopath to be who they are and what they are. But I think she was one of them, and she certainly identified with Dwayne Hickman and said, this guy is the guy. And he was obviously a psychopath, a murderous one. And then she built this entire philosophy around this guy's personality, and it's just... It's breathtaking. Diana, did you have a question beyond that, or did you just want to make a comment?
Actually, between this, without all the hand-wringing I've been doing and worrying and being an activist the best that I can for Biden and going back to FDR, I just love that. But what can I do? Half of my family are not on the same thing, Besides, I call my senators all the time. So which would be the best topic for me to call today?
Well, I think generally, being in contact with the people who represent you is important. I think the probably one of the most overlooked things that the people who want to be politically active do is forget local stuff. Who in Sanford, Maine, who represents you on the city council and the mayor, in your Maine state legislature, who is your state representative and who is your senator, and are you paying attention to what they're doing and what they're up to? And can you get involved in those races by helping, good Democrats get elected to office? And then, of course, at the federal level, just joining the local Democratic Party is a huge deal. And showing up for those virtual meetings online and physical meetings, when the day comes again, and volunteering. There's a bunch of organizations out there too. I know one of the things that indivisible.org does that's so good is they actually kind of send out assignments. It's not super frequently. I'm on their list. I get one maybe once a week, and it's like, okay, we're going to focus on this and this and this, and here's the number, and here's what you do, and I find that real useful. So there's all those avenues for activism, but the bottom line is just figure out what you're going to do and jump in with both feet. and don't give up. Diana, I have to move along, but thank you for the call.
Well,
thank you for your kind words.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot for the call. Al in Oakland, California. Hey, Al, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I'm not a redundant person, so I'm going to get right to it.
Thank you. And get your mouth closer to the microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where do you see the Republican Party going with the exit of Cheney and Kissinger? Kissinger. Where do you see this party headed? Number one. Number two, California. I'm obviously in California. California seems to. I'm a bicyclist. I ride everywhere, and most of the people that I ride around my neighborhood here in Oakland, Hayward, all these areas. We have so much homelessness here, and most of these people that are homeless are from other states, mainly the red states. And what can we do?
The cold red states, yeah.
Yeah, man, cold-blooded, and so.
Well, I mean, cold too, physically. People leave Montana, when they're broke, so that they could, if they're going to live on the street, it's much more comfortable than in Southern California or even in Oakland than it is in Butte, Montana, with the horrible winters. I get that.
But why don't they create facilities for them there?
Because they're Republicans, because they're Republicans. This is a nationwide problem, Al. We did not, those of us old enough to remember America before Reagan, before the 1980s, remember that there basically was no homeless problem in the United States prior to the 80s. There was a mental health problem there, but it was also well dealt with. Reagan destroyed the mental health system in California, first as governor and then nationally, and essentially created our modern homelessness problem, or at least the mentally ill part of it, which is probably a third, maybe a quarter to a third of the people who are finding themselves homeless. They're people who range from severe psychosis to just, so mildly disturbed or PTSD. A lot of, I think the number is 41,000 vets are homeless right now in the United States. Just some mind-boggling number in many cases, just because they can't deal with PTSD and issues like that. We need a national response to homelessness. There is not a community in America right now, particularly in parts of the country where the weather is nice, which is increasingly all across the country, that isn't freaked out about homeless people. Bringing crime and dirt and disease and whatnot to their neighborhood. But the bigger issue is, what about those people themselves? These are human beings. We should be feeding them. We should be providing them with medical care. We should be meeting their needs. We should be figuring out what they need in order to become, at least, if they can't become functional members of society, at least, part of society rather than living on the outside of society, essentially, both perceived that way by others and perceived that way by themselves. And it's an issue that the Democratic Party has been somewhat reluctant to pick up because it's complex, B, it's controversial, and C, it smells like welfare. And there are still elements of that anti-welfare strain in the Democratic Party. And the Republican Party won't have anything to do with, because in the Republican Party worldview, if you're poor and you're broke and you're living in a tent, it's your own damn fault, and I got mine, screw you. I mean, that's kind of the entire Republican philosophy boiled down to one long sentence. So I don't have an easy answer for this, other than that we need to be, from the federal and state level, we need to be providing services to communities. I know that Portland is struggling like hell right now with the homeless population. And there's a lack of resources and there's a lack of, frankly, respect for the humanity of homeless people, number one. Number two, to your question, what about the Republican Party getting rid of Liz Cheney and Adam Kitzinger, I think it is? And yeah, and then you got Mitt Romney. Yeah, he's the congressman from, as I recall, Northern Illinois. And then you've got Mitt Romney, who's getting booed at his own convention. I don't know where this goes, Al. And it's got me scratching my head. Somebody raised a question over on Democratic Underground, might have been this morning, might have been yesterday, of what's going to happen to the GOP when Trump is gone. What happens if he eats one too many cheeseburgers and drops dead? Eventually that's going to happen. I mean, it might be a decade, it might be a month, but without Trump, is there a Republican Party anymore? Is there an heir apparent?
With Scott, you said with Tim Scott, he's going to throw his hat in the ring. All these things you're seeing, what's happening in Florida as we speak, being arrested, protesting, being shot, and not being accountable for it by police. A lot of these things that are very, very perplexing. And what I'm seeing here in California, I was born in Oakland, raised in Berkeley. And as a result of that, I got a leg up on a lot of this stuff because I was in Berkeley during all of this. And as a result of what I'm seeing, I'm seeing that California can make it on its own. We can cede from the union. We can pay our own tax,
unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Al, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. But thank you for the call. It's some tough questions.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And there are some tough realities that, as a country, we are failing to rise to the occasion with regard to. We have refugees, essentially, in the United States. And welcome back. Rick in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rick, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what's up. I find it hard to believe that this voter suppression is going on, and the Democrats don't seem to be able to do anything about it. It's like they're waiting for some possible excuse where they can do something. But why can't they do that? This affects the whole country. It ought to be a federal issue, and they just seem to be ignoring it. So what am I missing?
Yeah, what you're missing is H.R. 1, also known as Senate Bill 1, SB 1, also known as the For the People Act, that would overrule all of those things that they're doing, almost all of the things that they're doing in the states. And the thing that is preventing that piece of legislation, which has already passed the House of Representatives, the thing that is preventing it from passing the Senate is the filibuster. And one of the things that I would keep an eye on here, Rick, is this afternoon, Joe Biden is having a private one-on-one meeting with Joe Manchin. Okay. This is going to be interesting. Where does this go? Now, theoretically, the meeting is about the infrastructure plan. But I'm guessing, and I'm just, having watched LBJ do this, and LBJ knew the Senate as well as Joe Biden knows the Senate. These are guys who were both in the Senate for like decades. And my guess is that the conversation is going to be something like this. Biden's going to say, hey, you want to have some bridges named after you, Joe? Do you want to, help rebuild West Virginia? You want to cut poverty in half in West Virginia? You want to be part of a really consequential and positive change where people are going to be saying your name decades from now, like they do Robert Byrd. There's a Robert Byrd Bridge. There's a Robert Byrd Parkway. Robert Byrd was the previous senator from West Virginia who, in his later days in particular, did a fair amount of good, actually. Early on, he was crazy, but that's a whole other thing. But he's going to be saying, do you want this legacy? Or do you want the legacy of nothing gets done again? Nothing gets done like for the last 40 years. You're going to have to sign up with us. I will give you all these things, Joe. I will give you the, your bridges. I'll give you your tunnels. I'll give you broadband. We'll put West Virginians back to work. We'll prioritize West Virginia. But you got to help me with this filibuster, and you've got to help me with these bills, and you got to help me with some of the other reluctant senators like Kyrsten Sinema. That's what I'm hoping that conversation is going to be like, because you're absolutely right, Rick. These laws that are being passed are fundamentally anti-American. I would, in a normal universe, I would say they are anti-democratic with a small d, but that still sounds like Democratic Party, so I'm not even going to say that. These are anti-American. America was founded on the idea that the majority rules. There are protections for the minorities, but the majority rules, and that's called democracy. And this legislation that is being passed in state after state after state to make it harder for people to vote so that a minority can essentially rule is just so wrong. It's just so wrong. And HR 1, would ban it. It would outlaw it. And that's why in your activism, if you're reaching out, in particular to your senators, and you've got two senators there from West Virginia, I think it's Shelley Moore Caputo and Joe Manchin. Actually, I don't recall where you were in Pennsylvania. Joe was in Pennsylvania, so you got two senators too, and one is retiring. But in any case, reach out to your senators and say it's time to end the filibuster. It's just absolutely time to end the filibuster. And of course, you can go to whitehouse.gov too, and you can leave a message, because Joe Biden needs to be putting the pressure on these folks. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So back in the day, and I mean back in the 1780s, literally, when the Constitutional Convention was happening in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, there was this debate about the quality of the vote. Whether people who only landowners should be allowed to vote, stuff like that. And, in order to ensure that well-informed people who really care about voting are the only ones voting. It didn't pass. It was rejected by the framers of the Constitutional Convention, this idea that only landowners should be allowed to vote. Never made it in the Constitution. But a variation on this is now being proposed in the Arizona legislature. And State Representative John Kavanaugh, who's the chair of the committee that's pushing this legislation, says the quality of the vote is important. We have to look at the quality of votes as well. I've got a new video all about this for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, excuse me. Boy, what a day this has turned into, eh? Michael in Chicago. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I wanted to call about homelessness. There is a partial solution that we can all engage in. They're called affordable housing trust funds. They're happening all over the country. They can be done in a city, in a county, or even a regional area. And they provide use local dollars in unique ways to build new housing to house homeless people. And a community can help 100 or 200 people a year. Larger cities like Los Angeles, if they did this, could 1,000 or more people a year. So we can chip away at it with these trust funds. People's Action is a group I work for, works on that. Also, Community Change is a group that works on this all the time. So there are partial solutions.
Great, Michael. I'm so glad to hear that, and that there are people like you who are out there doing the work. That's great. Thank you very much for the call. Brian in Middletown, New Jersey. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I just wanted to talk about Colonial Pipeline, but before, somebody called about bullet points. The one I always hit them with is every Republican president since Hoover has had a recession. I mean, that stuns them, and it's actually true. So they be the best for the economy. Yeah. But the thing about the Colonial Pipeline thing is this is a bigger story than people realize. And I'm not a big person who believes in conspiracy theories, but the Republicans right now the only criticism they have is gas prices are going up, and of course they're transitory, it goes up and down over time. But when you think about the connections, the Trump, Putin, Ukraine, Giuliani, this is a Russian-sponsored act. I got a bad feeling about this. I really do.
Yeah. Well, this was why I said earlier, keep an eye on this story, because whether this is a group saying, because cyber warfare is a thing, and it's a thing that the world has not yet reckoned with in a meaningful way. There have been two major attacks in all of history. The first was the Stuxnet virus. Or worm, I guess it was, that the United States and Israel got into the Iranian centrifuges, and we destroyed, thousands of their centrifuges. That was an act of cyber warfare. That was the first one. The second one was when a group inside Russia took down Ukraine. And I mean, took them down. Shut down their banks, shut down their gas stations, shut down their phone systems, shut down everything. And it was a retaliatory attack against Ukraine. And in fact, they've done that twice with Ukraine. But, and again, you know, it was cyber warfare, but it hasn't been kind of recognized by the world as war. And the Chinese, the United States, the Iranians, the North Koreans, the Russians, there's a small collection of countries. The Saudis actually are getting into this in a big way. A small collection of countries that are throwing billions, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars into cyber warfare capability on the assumption that the next world war is not going to be a nuclear war. It's going to be a cyber war. It's going to be about shutting down people's cities and shutting off their water. And I mean, if you shut down a major American city and shut off their water supply and their electricity, you know, after 2 or 3 days, you're going to have people dying. I mean, you're going to have major, serious crises, and you know, no need to drop a bomb to turn a city into a wasteland. Just kill off their utilities. So, you know, is this part of something like that? Probably not. It's probably a criminal gang that just targeted a big company and they're trying to make a lot of money. But it exposes one of many vulnerabilities in the United States, and it particularly exposes, and this is the thing that blows my mind, is nobody's talking about this in media. It particularly exposes our vulnerability based on our addiction to fossil fuels, because this is a fossil fuel pipeline. And it is taking energy from one part of the country that has a lot of fossil fuels down in the Texas area and putting it in a part of the country that does not have a lot of fossil fuels up in the Northeast, where there used to be fossil fuels, where we pumped all that stuff out of the ground in the late 1800s and early 1920s, early 1900s. And now it's empty. I mean, Pennzoil used to be a thing because Pennsylvania used to be the #1 oil producing state in the country. Then it was Ohio was the #1 producing oil state in the country. Well, now we're down to Texas, you know, and then it was Oklahoma. Now we're down to Texas, and importing it as well. We shouldn't be addicted to fossil fuels, and that needs to be another message that comes out of this thing. Is you know, no, we're going to start having a rational energy policy, where when the fossil fuels get cut off, our homes don't freeze. You know, things can still work. And we can do that with renewables. We can do that with solar and wind. You see where electric cars are going to be cheaper than combustion engines within the next 3 years? I mean, they're saying by 2027, but maybe even earlier. It's just incredible. Brian, I'm with you. This is a big deal. So thanks so much for being with us today. We will be back tomorrow. My apologies if I haven't gotten to your call yet. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, with, you know, more great show, as they say in the radio business. Thanks so much for being with us. I truly appreciate it. It's great interacting with you all, and I hope that all the work and research that Louise and Sean and Nate and I do putting this show together and bringing it to you is of value. So please get out there, get active, tag you're it. Right? Activism starts with all of us, and that includes you. Have a great afternoon. Be good to somebody. Okay?
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!